afternoon, or good evening to my listeners across the globe. This is Mubilu Musoke. This time I have a special program which is different from Democratization of Africa, case of Uganda in a comparative perspective. This program, although it's very similar to democratization because it has to do with democracy too, but I've chosen because the normal host of this program normally talks about Kampala City, and so I've chosen to also focus on Kampala City. And the title of my presentation, the conversation, is Kampala City, a Den of Thieves. The purpose of this conversation is to try to understand the political turbulence in Kampala City. In order to understand the politics that is driving this political turbulence, we will look at three aspects of corruption in Kampala City. First, we look at an investigation by the IGG, the Inspector General of Government, of the property located at 61 Yusufulule Road, formerly known as Kitante Road. Second, we look at Kampala City corruption, which has mutated into organized crime. In other words, organized crime has evolved from the ordinary corruption that has infested the city for some time. And lastly, we shall look at Kampala City management controversy between the Lord Mayor Elias Lukwago and the director of the city authority, Jennifer Mosisi. What does this controversy teach us about what is going on in Kampala City, and whether or not it is actually connected to corruption too? What makes the IGG investigation of what was going on at 61 Yusufulule important in the 90s and 2000s is the fact that it exposed the corruption connecting the central government relationship with the NRM, the corruption in the Uganda Land Commission involving the registration of land in the city, Kampala City contracts illegally voted to award leases to certain companies, and above all, collusion between lawyers who filed the consent judgments in the High Court. The first corrupt relationship the IGG uncovered was the relationship between the government and the NRM, the political party. Section 34 of the Movement Act provided that, quote, all assets and property of the organs under the movement shall be deemed to be assets of the state, unquote. This legal relationship should have ceased to exist when the multi-party system was restored in 2005. This, however, did not happen. Therefore, a corrupt relationship between NRM and the government continued, probably continues even today. This has also included financing the NRM activities at Chiangkwans and also financing NRM party elections. The IGG Faith Monda found that, quote, there is gross mismanagement of the land registry, evidenced by the rampant forgeries of land titles and the eventual loss of property by landlords through fraudulent transactions. There is an unaccountable number of forged titles in circulation, most of which are abated by the staff of the registry. This is coupled with loss of documents, especially the white page. White page is a special page in registration of titles. Indiscipline and extortion of money by the public, unquote. The IGG found that Kampala City Councillors violated the Local Administrations Act, which requires any city council official who participates in city decisions to disclose their pecuniary interests in any transactions they are involved in. They should not participate in such decisions without disclosing their pecuniary interests, and when they do disclose their pecuniary interests, they are supposed to abstain from making those decisions affecting transactions in which they have pecuniary interests. The councillors of Kampala City routinely violate this law. The IGG also found that, quote, and here I'm quoting, concluded that the whole process of offer and registration of the lease to Park Royal Limited, this is the lease at 61 Yusuf Road, was characterized by illegalities and frauds right from 1996 when KCC made the lease offer to Park Royal upon the consent judgment and the subsequent registration of the lease. One fraudulent action led to another until the end of the process, which included not only the attempt to defraud government of its land, but also fraudulently revising the premium of 73 million shillings to 35 million shillings, and later on to 25 million shillings, with the intention to cause financial loss to KCC, unquote. Now that transaction clearly shows that city councillors participate in decisions in which they have pecuniary interests and routinely get involved in corrupt deals within the city. Now, I turn to the problem which I call the hired gangsters. The most dramatic case that illustrates the presence of organized crime in Uganda was reported in Bukedde Kusande. The Buke de Kusande of March the 3rd, 2012. According to Buke de Kusande, organized groups with names such as Chikankane, Yellow Force, and Black Force have headquarters in different parts of Kampala. And the city officials are aware of some of these activities, but they end up just protecting them instead of arresting them. Buke de Kusande met and interviewed a young man who worked for these groups. The young man, who is from Masaka, Bukoma, Nsimbi, was recruited into the organized crime syndicate from school by his friend Matovu in 2000. The recruiter was related to an individual whose identity is revealed as Captain Semogerere, who owned a gun they used in their organized crime business. Matov introduced the recruit to his bosses in Gomba, where they ambushed automobiles belonging to the local traders. They stole from the traders border, and even raped women as a sideline. After being recruited, his bosses liked him very much because they noted that the new recruit was a very enthusiastic and determined operator, judged by his performance in the missions assigned to him. And in the previous program, I think they talked about the youths. These are youths who are being recruited to do these gangster activities. However, and I think that has a lot of implications when youths are hired to get involved in organized crime. However, after almost a decade in the organized crime gang, he escaped from these gangs and was in hiding at the time he was interviewed by Buke de Kusande. He told Buke de Kusande that the bosses behind these groups include commanders in the police force in Kampala. The commanders are responsible for the murders and robbery committed by the gangs. The executioners of the missions are treated as mere employees of the gang. After recruiting the first test, the recruit was given was to ambush a truck and transporting bread from the company known as Kidawalime. The truck was coming from Gomba at a place called Nsambu. The group attacked the bread truck. They shot and killed one woman. The driver was also shot in the arm, but managed to escape with severe wounds. On another occasion, they ambushed a truck carrying cows from Gomba. In this mission, they used the AK-47 belonging to their captain, the captain who is the official in the city, Kampala City. One of their bosses was a very influential figure in the government. Whenever they were arrested and sent to police custody or prison, he managed to get them out released. Police officers in the area feared their influential boss. They used to wear masks on their missions for these guys. In Gomba, among other activities, were stealing cows, goats, border, money from gas stations, shops, and airtime sellers. They shot several people in these operations. Among the victims killed was Kakande of Mpenja, who was shot getting out of the bathroom. But because of the children managed to recognize them. They were attacked at Matovu's home and Samuel Gerere's mother at Gomba. The home was totally destroyed. The battle was so intense that Kinoni police could not suppress the attackers. Law enforcement sent for reinforcement from Mpigi, was sent from Mpigi, and after Rogers killed a policeman, they swiftly escaped to their dens in Kampala. The bosses of the gangs rented a house for them at Lunguja, Natete, where they received more training in robbery and killing people. They met other members with whom they coordinated their activities. The motorcycle group's job was to survey and identify potential projects. You can see that these people were behaving like real business people. Their jobs included being hired by the rich landlords who wanted to evict tenants. In their strategies, they would kill a few people, and the following day, the remaining tenants would voluntarily evacuate the area for fear of being killed. Among the other jobs the gangs did from their dens in Kampala were being hired by married people to eliminate their spouses or those with the Bivanja disputes who wanted to avenge themselves. A certain individual called Kabagambe was a friend of their boss in Rubaga. He had a house in Kivumbiro, Busega, where they got their instructions for new operations. From 2000 to 2011, the gang estimated that they killed about 300 people. In 2011 alone, they had 30 assignments to kill people. They robbed in the Natete area and other suburbs of Kampala. For example, they attacked Musai's shop in Natete and robbed an estimated 40 million shillings in one day. And the narrator, the boy who was, the youth who was interviewed by Bukele de Busande, was the commander of the operation. The robbers were, however, unhappy behind their bosses because their bosses gave them very little money as their share compared to the size of the booty they brought home to their bosses. One day, they robbed a Chinese businessman on Beni Chiwanuka Street who imported handbags. They also stole computers, DVDs, and telephones at Vido Dido, where they found a young Asian man on duty on whose head they pointed a muzzle of the gun. On that occasion, They robbed the telephones, the DVDs, and money. On the same day, they ambushed a vehicle from the farm on Mitiana Road. After robbing it, they retired with their booty to their dens in Kampala City. On another day, the narrator and another individual identified as Mansour robbed a trader identified as Francis Jr., who sold airtime. Before robbery, members of the gang followed him from Machinde to Najanankumpi, where they sprayed him with bullets. Before they go for a robbery operation, the members of the gang are tuned up. They are given money to buy drugs such as marijuana and other intoxicating substances. In each area of operation, there are bosses who do the planning and give instructions on how to execute a specific robbery. If a member of the gang fails on 3 consecutive times in his missions, the bosses secretly plan to eliminate him by killing him so that he may not conspire to reveal their illegal activities. The gang normally uses motorcycles to escape quickly from the scene of the crime and use expensive cars when they have long-distance missions. They deposit money on special accounts if the mission is a long distance away, in order to avoid moving around with a lot of money. They also have lawyers who help them to get released whenever they get arrested. When a new member is recruited in these gangs, he has to take an oath of silence and swear not to disclose anything to his relatives or friends without the permission of his bosses. A member of the gang cannot refuse any assignment. A member of the gang cannot refuse any assignment and must disclose his location every 2 hours and report what he's doing. So there is some discipline in these gangsters' activities. The groups have contacts in police stations who work with them to accomplish their missions. And the police stations, we mean Kampala City police stations. This is the city I'm talking about. They also have an army officer they work with in all the Kampala area of Kampala City. This officer has helped the gangs a lot in accomplishing their missions. They also have journalists such as Boxis Panda and Gearbox who spy for them and help them disseminate news about their movements. The gangs operate as a military unit. The people they work with are trained security officers, and some have been in the organization for a very long time. The gang is very much interested in people who sell airtime because they have they move around with a lot of money, and their bosses have planted spies in their organizations who follow their movements with knowledge or how much money they make a day. The main reason why the narrator was disclosing the secrets of the gangs is because he was haunted all the time by the innocent deaths he had caused. He claims to have met Kaihura, to whom he was introduced by a young man identified as a junior. He also claims he informed Kaihura everything he knew. At the time he disclosed the secrets and activities of the gangs, he lived in fear because he suspected his former colleagues were looking for him, most likely to kill him, of course. They were aware that he had disclosed all the information published in Bouquet de Kusande to the authorities and the rest of the world. He says that if he gets a chance to meet the president, his first request would be to ask him for forgiveness for killing innocent people. He says he would also tell him all the secrets of the business of the gangs. Now, this information was published in Bouquet de Kusande, which is a government document. I suspect that the journalists do observe journalistic ethics, and therefore I believe their story unless the contrary is proved. So Bouquet de Kusande reports that one of the victims who was shot in Naklavi but survived the ordeal reported his incident to the police with his relatives to Kale Kaihura, who handed over the case to Simon Kawes, police commander of Kampala. But apparently no action has been taken. In October 2011, the gangs shot Christopher Biriamo Maiso on his way home at Kazo Bwais. He died in the hospital. The motives for these killings are not made clear in the report. I'm reproducing in this conversation a translated version of the report by Bouquet de Kusande, narrated in the second person, in order to illustrate how uncontrolled corruption, especially in Kampala City, has successfully mutated into sophisticated organized crime in the city of Kampala. The trend of this mutation is on the increase. Unless drastic action is taken to contain the situation through democratization of Uganda and restoration of rule of law, the criminal gangs are going to rule the capital city of Uganda and terrorize innocent people in the whole country. Remember that organized crime profits from somebody else's effort or economic production. The simple truth is, as the details of this report indicate in graphic detail, there is no difference between terrorism and organized crime. And yet, the only terrorists NRM talks about are those openly demanding the exercise of their human rights to assemble, to associate, and express themselves freely. In that respect, NRM is an ally of the organized crime conducted by terrorists. As long as Museveni can stay in power, he would rather tolerate the terror of organized crime than grant the people their political freedom if there is a chance that he may lose his illegal tenure in State House. Let us look more closely at the terrorism of the organized crime directly caused by corruption under NRM. As we have illustrated above in this conversation, by the corruption scandals that have plagued the NRM in various sectors, uncontrolled corruption is a symptom of the absence of democracy and rule of law. That means that organized crime cannot be controlled or eliminated before corruption is controlled or eliminated. In this context, the equation of organized crime with terrorism is not idle or loose talk. From the content of the newspaper report, Bouquet de Coussin, it is clear that terrorism and organized crime have a close kinship. Organized crime recruits its members in secret, so does terrorism. In a democratic society, that should trigger the bells of freedom ringing loud. Second, all recruits of organized crime must take an oath of allegiance to abide by the secret orders of their bosses, whose identity must remain unknown. Third, the activities of the criminal gang, like that of the terrorists, are illegal. They have no legitimacy in a democratic system of government. And the fourth, organized crime gangs do not have a rational code of conduct. The force they use is disproportionate, their victims are chosen at random, and they are almost always innocent. That is, the victims. Fifth, organized crime can only succeed under at least two conditions. First, the rule of law is not effectively enforced, which allows criminal gangs to operate with impunity. And second, because of the latter, the first point, some of the law enforcement officials either actively collaborate in the organized crime syndicates or turn a blind eye to their activities. In the case of Uganda, the rule of law is not effectively enforced, and the law enforcement officials seem to be actively involved in organized crime. Then we must take action to restore the rule of law through democratization. And this is the cause of the problem of the Kampala city scandal. The problem of lack of checks and balances, politicization of the judiciary, and especially malicious politics currently dominating the political process are all illustrated by the Kampala City Act scandal, which escalated into the political battle between the elected Lord Mayor of Kampala City, Elias Lukwago, and the NRM stooge, the Director of Kampala City Authority, Jennifer it is important that we look at these situations and we explain the causes and the nature of the problem. Some people may just think, oh, there is bad blood between Elias Lukwago and Jennifer Musisi. No, when you look more carefully under a microscope, you can see behind the real problem is corruption. And it can only be eliminated by good government. It is not surprising that the parliament that enacted the KCCA, Kampala Capital City Act, was dominated by NRM members who constituted 77% of the members of parliament, a factor which aggravated the problem of fighting corruption. Parliament, in enacting the KCCA, was acting not in the interests of Uganda as a whole, but as was simply implementing directives from a politically greedy and unprincipled corrupt president. In fact, President Museveni had a corrupt ulterior motive which he did not hide in wanting to control Kampala city management. NRM regime had attempted several times to have its members to be elected mayor, but failed. As a result, Museveni saw the solution in enacting KCCA as a means of controlling and manipulating the management of Kampala City. It is possible that many of the MPs who participated in the enactment of KCCA were not fully aware of Museveni's corruptive motives. They, nevertheless, cannot be excused from enacting a law that violates the principles of decentralization, sovereignty of the people, and the Constitution as the supreme law of Uganda. Museveni achieved his objective of managing Kampala City by creating the position of Executive Director of Kampala City Authority, appointed by the President. The position of Director of Kampala City Authority was designed to usurp and nullify the substantive powers of the popularly elected mayor of Kampala City. To complete the control mechanism, KCCA also created the position of Minister for Kampala in charge of Kampala City, capital city. All these are unnecessary, if not redundant, administrative layers, a corrupt way of to usurp and abuse the power of the people by a centralized structure that conflicts with and contravenes the Constitution of Uganda, judged by his political behavior and the treatment of members of the opposition. Anything, the President Museveni does not believe in democracy. I think that much we know. He is also a corrupt politician who would do anything in order to attain his personal political objectives at any price. That is why he suppresses freedom of association and assembly and has corruptly subverted a free and fair electoral process since 1996. The purpose of KCCA is spelled out clearly. It is, quote, to provide for the administration of Kampala City by the central government, unquote. The objective of KCCA is therefore to enable the central government to administer directly a local government political entity that would otherwise be self-governing under the Constitution of Uganda. The laws which apply to districts which are supposed to be decentralized under the Constitution also apply to Kampala City Authority. Therefore, one has
Mr. Mubilu, we have a call.
That KCCA, which provides for the administration of Kampala City by the central government, violates the Constitution. Districts are supposed to be are not supposed to be administered by the President's office.
Mr. Mubilu?
This would be contrary to the principle of decentralization. Yes?
You have a call.
Okay, sure.
Yes, Mr. Mubilu, thank you so much for your program. Very, very intellectual and very uplifting and very informative. As you know, my name is Musana. I'm a co-host for the Agwanga Media program, and I usually don't call your program, but this time I'm compelled to do so. On one thing, that as of today, you're talking about the Lord Mayor. As of today, the Lord Mayor's office is still blocked by the police. He is not allowed access his office, especially that now the talk, the talk between him and the criminals, of the government, the talks have not gone through. They have increased security, not allowed him to move into his office, despite the court's order to let him, start his duties. So, can you explain more? I do have an idea of what you might say, but I want you to give our listeners a concrete proof that we have an outlaw government, that if somebody declares to fight the government of Uganda with arms or with force, remove the government with force using arms, that such organization or such entities will not be violating the Uganda Constitution. Given what the court's order to restore the Lord Mayor and the current status right now, that the government has disobeyed the order and has reinforced police to block the Lord Mayor from performing his function, is that grounds enough, or is that reason enough for somebody to point out that the government has abrogated the Constitution and therefore I have the right to use force of arms because the Constitution is doing so? Give me that option. Is this one of those times when the Constitution grants you permission to use any means to remove the government? I just wanted to let us know, because we keep hearing has varied the Constitution so many times. So is this one of the times? Is this one of those two times that he has varied the Constitution? Thank you so much, Mr. Mubilu, and I'll listen to you.
Thank you for the call, Sana. You've raised a lot of issues. I don't know whether I can go through all of them, but I'll try. Well, yes, the Lord Mayor's office is locked, and he is not allowed access to that office. Obviously, that's a violation of the law, because there is no valid explanation for that action. That since the lawyer under the law, under the court order, he's still the mayor. So whoever is preventing the mayor from accessing his office is violating the law. You've mentioned about the talks that have failed between the mayor and the government. Well, I'm not surprised that such talks would fail, because their intention is not upright. I mean, there is no purpose to talk to the government to beg. What are you negotiating? What is the subject matter you are negotiating about? To get concessions and provide the mayor to have less power than he already exercises. And in any case, I'm coming to that issue of the power of the mayor and the director of the city authority. I'll be addressing those shortly. But to go back to the question, the issue of security. The reason why I started with the corruption is to paint a clear, call it graphic, but a clear picture of what is going on in Kampala. Now, these policemen can afford to provide 24-hour surveillance of the mayor's office, mayor's home, so that he can't go out. But the gangsters, these criminals I talked about, are committing all these atrocities around the city. They are killing people, innocent people. I mean, does it make sense? There is no shame for the NRM regime has no shame, because you can't ignore the security of the people of Kampala who are terrorized by gangs, and yet support provide the police to illegally occupy the mayor's residence. And so as to the government which has disobeyed the court orders, yes, that's regrettable. Musana raises the question whether it is now time to use arms. Well, one thing I have to point out, that in our process of liberating ourselves, we are not going to act as terrorists, because that would defeat our aim of what we are really fighting for. And when I think Brenda's program has already enlightened us very well about two people, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They refused to use force. They used non-violent activity. You can say, well, these people could use non-violence because the regime they were dealing with was different from what the regime in Uganda. That may be true. But at the same time, our main objective is to educate the people. And as long as the people are educated and they know their rights, and they know that, like, violating the Constitution as they are doing, which I'm going to come to very shortly, then the people must take action to prevent the regime from violating the Constitution. That's the best I can tell you about those particular issues, that the people have a right, But we definitely are not going to use terrorism to achieve our political objectives. So now let me continue with my conversation. The principle of decentralization is articulated in Article 176 of the Constitution. It is important and a very important component of decentralization. Given the history of Uganda, where oppressive regimes were in the past free and determined to control the people at the lowest levels of government, decentralization was seen and, as a means of preventing the central government from making decisions for the people at the local levels. The principle of decentralization was the result of historical experience. The 1967 Constitution established a highly centralized political structure which was repressive and unfortunately mistakenly equated with national unity, with the centralized national government. There was this philosophy that tended to view centralization as a means of achieving national unity, which in fact is not true, because you can't force people to unite. In fact, when you give them freedom, you achieve much more unity than when you suppress them. The movement system established in 1986 was worse because the resistance council structures and later on the local council structures formed an administrative structure which was commandeered by the local government ministry of the central government, from top to the lowest level of local government at the bottom. The resistance councils, which included local defense units, which formed part of the central government, were part of the central government civil service. Decentralization under 1995 Constitution was therefore consciously designed to break down and prevent the reintroduction of the two centralized systems established by 1967 Constitution and the movement system of 1986. Decentralization was also a weapon to dispel central government from local affairs and allow the people to exercise self-determination and self-governance at the same time. Decentralization under 1995 Constitution was based on the district as the basic unit of local government. Article 176 of the 1995 Constitution provides that the system of local government shall, quote, ensure that functions, powers, and responsibilities are devolved and transferred from government to local government units, and decentralization shall be a principle applying to all levels of government, and in particular from higher to lower local government units, to ensure people's participation and democratic control in decision making unquote. So decentralization is therefore an important component of democratization of local government and self-determination of the people. One of the national objectives and directive principles of state policy in the 1995 Constitution deals with the democratic principles. One of these principles states that, quote, the state shall be guided by the principle of decentralization and the devolution of governmental powers or functions and powers to the people at the appropriate levels where they can best manage and direct their own affairs, unquote. This national objective and directive principle clearly prohibits the enactment of KCCA. The purpose of decentralization is to democratize the system by devolving power to the people in their local areas. Decentralization and democratization are intended to empower the people and not to usurp their power or authority by the central government. That is why Article 1 of the Constitution vests sovereignty in the people. By virtue of their sovereignty, all power belongs to the people and, quote, all authority in the state emanates from the people of Uganda, and the people shall be governed through their will and consent, unquote. In order to attain these political objectives, the Constitution also provides that the people shall express their will and consent on who will govern them and how they should be governed through regular, free, and fair elections of their representatives. The creation of the executive director of the authority appointed by the president is therefore unconstitutional and incompatible with the office of the mayor of Kampala, who is directly elected by the people of Kampala City. In order to ensure that sovereignty of the people will be protected by the Constitution and the authority of the people is not abused by corrupt leaders who can usurp the power of the people by enacting laws such as KCCA, the Constitution is declared the supreme law of Uganda. The Constitution also shall have binding force on all authorities and persons throughout Uganda. If any other law or any custom is inconsistent with any of the provisions of the Constitution, the Constitution shall prevail, and the other law or custom, to the extent of inconsistency, will be void. That is provided for in Article 2 of the Constitution. These constitutional provisions were designed to prevent corrupt leaders from abusing their office. This, however, is exactly what President Museveni does through KCCA. The executive director of Kampala City is appointed by the president on the advice of the Public Service Commission, And the executive director is supposed to be a person of high moral character and proven integrity, who is qualified to be a permanent secretary. In other words, the level of the status of the director of the Kampala City Authority is supposed to be at that range of permanent secretary in a government ministry. The executive director is the head of the public service of the authority and the head of the administration of the authority. The executive director is also the accounting officer of the authority, responsible for the management of public funds, and is supposed to advise the mayor on government policy, oversees the delivery of services to the population of the Kampala city, and other things. One would therefore assume that the remuneration of the executive director would be determined by the rules of the civil service, but they are not. The current executive director's salary is way beyond the permanent secretary. So Section 77 of KCCA does not mention executive director, which is surprising, among the members of the authority whose remuneration is determined by the minister in consultation with the Minister of Finance and Public Service. The basic salary of the current executive director is 36 million shillings a month, which is equivalent to $14,000 a month. Now, that is obscene. This is an outrageous amount which cannot be justified both under the city civil service rules and the per capita income of Ugandans. The salary of the current executive director was determined under corrupt conditions, especially as the officer of the executive director is equivalent to that of the permanent secretary of the ministry. Only the Lord Mayor, the Deputy Lord Mayor, and the councillors are mentioned under Section 77. So you see, there is a lot of corruption here. That's the point we are trying to make here. The very system that was set up by KCCA is a corrupt system that needs to be, if not abolished, at least revised. The omission of the executive director is therefore deliberate. We were told by a member of Kampala City Council on Voice of Uganda Radio, Mr. Alan Sewanyana. He was interviewed on this radio on December 2nd, 2013, that he said that the executive director herself determined the amount of her salary without regard to the salaries of comparative positions such as the permanent secretaries. This is clearly a case of corruption, which is unbounded by democratic checks and balances within the Kampala City Council. The position of the executive director of the authority cannot be treated as a position of an executive director of a private corporation or entity. It is a government position and therefore should conform to or equivalent government positions. So this is corruption. No wonder Jennifer Musisi is fighting to oust the mayor who has been pointing out, as we shall see later, the corruption that is going on within the city. That's why I started with the corruption, even organized crime. We pointed out in the first part of this conversation that these gangsters are protected by the police, and the police, some of them own these activities, and so you can see that the corruption is beyond control, and the only explanation for that is the absence of democracy, because checks and balances do not exist currently, especially with the removal of decentralized elements within the city council structure. Section 49, dealing with the financial provisions of the authority, violates also the Constitution. Section 49(2), for example, provides that the authority shall always accord preferential treatment to national priority program areas in its outlays. National priority areas, which means the central government, that the city council, the budget of the Kampala city will give priority to the national priority areas. No wonder the president has a minister responsible for Kampala city, again violating the Constitution, of course. So this provision, that is Section 49(2) of Kampala City Act, is inconsistent with the principle of decentralization on which the administration of Uganda is founded in the Constitution. Section 25 of KCCA gives power to the president to appoint persons to hold or act, quote, in any office in the service of the Kampala city of the rank of head of department or above. Why should the president be interested in appointing these heads of departments in a city? I know that because it is a capital city, he thinks therefore the president must control it, but that's in violation of the law. Even if the Constitution says that the Kampala city is the capital, that does not wipe out the principles of decentralization. On the contrary. So the functions of the Lord Mayor are limited to being political head of the capital city, to preside over all the meetings of the authority, host foreign and local dignitaries, head the authority in developing strategies and programs for the development of the city, monitor administration of the city, provide guidance to the division of the administration, that is in Section 11 of KCCA. But as you may remember, in my description of the functions of the executive, or the director of the executive authority, he has that person is responsible for the administration, for providing the services to the city. And of course, when we talk about services, we also include the police. The policing is very, very, very important. And the security in Kampala is very, very bad. And yet these people, the only activity they are involved in very, very efficiently is to steal money or to earn very, very high salaries without even producing anything to show for it. So the functions of the mayor are largely ceremonial. The corrupt objective of KCCA was therefore to render the Lord Mayor administratively irrelevant or redundant. It is therefore ironical that the accusations against the Lord Mayor allege failure to exercise substantive powers in the administration of the capital city. The Kampala City scandal and the process used to impeach the Lord Mayor of Kampala exposed the extent of the corruption caused by the NRM regime culture. The incompetency of the corruption within the judiciary were displayed by this scandal in Kampala City. A judge who was appointed to investigate the accusations against the mayor turned out to be a partisan NRM cadre whose only purpose was to execute orders from the president's office rather than adjudicate fairly and impartially an administrative process in accordance with the rules of natural justice. For example, given the functions of the Lord Mayor as laid down in KCCA, the accusations against the Lord Mayor are ridiculous. They are based on the false premise that the Lord Mayor exercises executive powers, like the executive director, who is responsible for the administration of Kampala City. We should look at these some of the details of these allegations against the mayor. Now, I want to stop here for a short break, and I'll be back to complete this conversation. Thank you very much.
Abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tuli bakasuka batuwalula buwaluzi kati abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tuli bakasuka ine kwanga lya Uganda ddene era kwanga kkulu osanga ebyobugagga enkumu n'ebyobuwangwa makula okukussa n'empisa ennungi n'obuntu bulamu n'okwaniriza abafudde ebule n'ebweya musanga ne kabaka wange nze kabaka wa Buganda ye Ssaabasajja ali omu yekka teri mulala tulya bukunkumu kyokka bitudde mu mikono ebiri Serumbete bwabulankanya ensimbi z'eggwanga obujulizi bubula olwo ng'agula ebizimbe ng'agula ettaka nga sendaba nkusere kubanga batuwalula buwaluzi kati abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tulira kasuka batuwalula buwaluzi kati abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tulira kasuka. Ganamuswa mwali atudde nzende abasajja kabaka nesijja kutitira ndeke nyime okuyima emundu yange ye palamenti yange basimugana otyasemaka okuteseza mu nju ye n'ab'ekika kye okozesa serumyo kigwotuma kwate bwete mutwakuwaza nnyo ne tutuuka okwetunda tunoonya ekyokulya etwasembesa nga tuli ku luwonzi batuwawanya netwagemanga endwadde z'amaanyi kati batukuba kalifomu batuwalula twebasa kati abasajja bakolokoke wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tulira kasuka batuwalula buwaluzi kati abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tulira kasuka.
Okay, after a short break, I'm back to continue and complete this conversation about Kampala City, a den of thieves. A tribunal consisting of the Honorable Lady Justice Catherine Bamugemeire, Mrs. Jessica Ochaya Lakidi, and Mr. Alfred Okello Oriem, was appointed by the minister to investigate allegations against the Lord Mayor. The real objective was to not to improve the administration of Kampala State, but to impeach and remove the Lord Mayor from office. This is obvious, especially the events that have followed the war scandal clearly show that the purpose was not really to impeach and remove the mayor lawfully, but to remove him from office at any expense, at any price. First of all, Mr. Alfred Okello Oriem is a member of NRM and a member of the President's Cabinet. Those two facts should have disqualified Alfred Okello Oriem from sitting on the tribunal, whose function is to determine impartially the validity of the allegations against the Lord Mayor of Kampala, an outstanding leader of the political opposition to NRM. Everybody knows that, and we did hear that from the campaign during the election of the mayor. It was very, very, very clear. Concerning the allegations of abuse of office, the tribunal concluded that Lord Mayor, in writing a letter, they produced Exhibit P1. P, of course, means prosecution. Incited the public against paying taxes. What we know about the mayor's statement is that it was a statement within his personal freedom. comment on public affairs in the city like anybody else. The Lord Mayor enjoys the same rights as all the residents of Kampala. The Lord Mayor has a right to advise the residents of the city on any subject matter affecting their interests, such as not to pay taxes which, due to corruption, which we outlined in the first segment of this conversation, the city authority cannot account for. Moreover, billions of dollars in Kampala city accounts disappeared without a trace when the executive director took over, and the mayor has been insisting that the executive director should account for what happened to the money. Instead, a vindictive prosecution was the result. This means that some people in the current administration of Kampala City are guilty of corrupt crimes. The truth must be exposed and the criminals punished. Therefore, the mayor has a good reason to warn the residents of the city against corruption. And the tribunal, however, distorted the facts and concluded that the mayor, in warning the residents of the city to fight corruption, he did so in abuse of his office. Hence, a prima facie case was made out in respect of this allegation. Another allegation was that there was evidence to record on the record indicating that the Lord Mayor, without approval or election by the authority, unilaterally appointed, recalled, replaced representatives to Makerere University and Mulago Nursing School to be represented on the council. This, according to the tribunal, was unlawful, illegal, and an abuse of office. For that reason, a prima facie case was made, but made out against the Lord Mayor in respect of this allegation. Second, regarding the failure to convene petition the meetings, according to the provisions of item 1.2 of the fourth schedule of KCCA, the tribunal concluded that there was several occasions when more than one-third of KCCA's 34 councillors petitioned the Lord Mayor to convene special meetings to discuss specific agenda items. On many occasions, the tribunal alleged the Lord Mayor refused or failed to convene the petitioned meetings. In such instances, the Lord Mayor either changed the agenda as they allege, the agenda items, unilaterally without assigning any reasons, or he based his refusal to convene meetings upon frivolous reasons, as they put it in their report. By so doing, the tribunal concluded that the Lord Mayor acted unlawfully, illegally, and in abuse of his office. Consequently, the tribunal was convicted, was convinced that the prima facie case was made out against the Lord Mayor in respect of this allegation. Abuse of office, as understood under the law, must include an element of gaining a quantifiable benefit from the abuse of office. Abuse of office normally refers to corruption, It therefore cannot be a mere failure to, or refusal for that matter, to schedule a meeting. Therefore, otherwise, any inefficiency could be interpreted as abuse of office, in which case the executive director herself has abused her office many times. In spite of the allegation of abuse of office made against the Lord Mayor by the tribunal relating to failure to schedule meetings, not a single allegation of corruption on part of the Lord Mayor was found by the tribunal. So that makes the situation very dubious. In one of the recommendations to Parliament, the authors of the Human Rights Report published in October, they made it clear that the term abuse of office needs clarification. Support amendment of the vague definition of corruption offenses in the Anti-Corruption Act, including abuse of office and causing financial loss, to bring them in line with the offenses as they are defined under international standards. So you can see these people were in a way abusing their authority when they made this allegation. The other allegation is has to do with the signing of the importance of the activities of the mayor. The tribunal found, for example, that the Lord Mayor did not assign any importance to the work of the committees or the tabling of the adoption of their reports. The tribunal also found that the Lord Mayor failed to accord importance, that's their phrase, to the functions of standing committees and to cause them to be reconstituted after they expired. The tribunal concluded that incompetence on part of the Lord Mayor part was the only plausible explanation for the failure. Therefore, the tribunal determined a prima facie case against the Lord Mayor existed on the two allegations of failure to accord importance to standing committees and a failure to reconstitute them upon their expiry. The executive director under KCCA is the primarily responsible for the administration of the authority. Therefore, making sure that committees are reconstituted and they function properly is the responsibility of the executive director, not the mayor, whose functions were reduced to ceremonial functions. Moreover, the tribunal concluded that under the law it was not clear who the head of the authority is. Under those circumstances, the tribunal cannot arbitrarily hold the mayor to be responsible for the administrative responsibilities that fall under the director of the authority of the city council. It is clear it was clear to the tribunal that the Lord Mayor did not accord the signing of minutes the importance the law accords to it under item paragraph 3 of the schedule to the KCCA. The tribunal defined incompetence as routine failure to perform a duty or function expected of a person possessed of skills to perform those functions. If a person possesses the skills to perform certain functions and they fail or refuse to perform them, that refusal to perform that function does not make them incompetent. They can be negligent, but not incompetent. Incompetence under the law refers to not legally qualified. The charge of incompetence is therefore redundant. It was a mistake for the tribunal to conclude that a prima facie case was made out against the Lord Mayor in respect of this allegation. About the willful misuse of information accused by the accessed by the Lord Mayor by virtue of his office to misinform the public and propagate lies against the officers and authority, the tribunal found this accusation well-founded. Eventually, the tribunal determined the Auditor General's ultimate position was contrary to the respondents, who is the mayor in this case. Ill-conceived, improper, alarmist treatment of the management letter. The tribunal considers that it was irresponsible for the person of the mayor to disseminate the content of the management letter beyond the environs of the authority. Indeed, the tribunal construes the manner in which the Lord Mayor handled the management letter as misconduct. For that reason, they concluded a prima facie case was made out against the Lord Mayor in respect of this allegation. Concerning allegation of failing to heed technical, legal, and administrative advice, the tribunal determined that KCCA, despite not being clear, emphatic about the responsibility being accountable to the minister for Kampala. It was not then applicable to the tribunal. Why it was not explicable to the tribunal why the Lord Mayor ignored the ministerial directives that were issued to him by the minister. While the advice of the technical staff was not necessarily binding on the Lord Mayor, the tribunal concluded that the Lord Mayor had a duty to implement ministerial directives. The tribunal faulted the mayor's failure to or refusal to implement ministerial directives, and it determined that it was misconduct on his part. Consequently, a prima facie case was supposedly made out against the Lord Mayor in respect of this allegation. In conclusion, the tribunal found that the three grounds of abuse of office, incompetence, misconduct, or misbehavior were proved, and therefore a prima facie case was for the removal of the Lord Mayor from office was established. We opened this section of the conversation by pointing out that KCCA violates the principles of decentralization, sovereignty of the people, and supremacy of the Constitution. There is therefore no constitutional duty on the part of the Lord Mayor to conform to the ministerial directives issued by the President's office. Local governments in Uganda are based on the right of the people to govern themselves and enjoy self-determination at the lowest level of local government. In fact, it is ironical that the executive director of Kampala City can accuse the Lord Mayor of being incompetent. First, Kampala City has sustained 4 fires which destroyed property in Owino Market since 2009. 2 of them occurring this year, 2013. Kampala Metropolitan Police has produced no report regarding the causes of these malicious fires. The primary responsibility to protect life and property falls directly under the functions of the executive director of the authority as administrator of Kampala City. It is very clear that the fires are the result of arson, maliciously set by corrupt criminal individuals in Kampala City. One of the biggest problems adversely affecting the administration of the city of Kampala is corruption, as we stated at the beginning. The absence of checks and balances contributes to the failure to effectively fight corruption. An elected leader is the best solution to fight corruption in the Kampala City, not an appointed one like the executive director. Second, Kampala City is one of the most dangerous places to live in the country, Uganda. In Uganda, robberies, murders are rampant, as we pointed out through the investigation of organized crime in Kampala. It's based in Kampala City itself, commanded by the police officers running in the city. In fact, these crimes have escalated beyond containment because corruption has mutated into profitable careers of organized crime syndicates. Buked Kusande published this report detailing this, which we started with, and analyzed and gave you a summary of what all these activities of organized crimes are. The Kampala Metropolitan Police were have been sucked into the organized crime syndicate. Instead of protecting the lives and property of the residents of Kampala, the police manpower in Kampala City is utilized 24 hours a day, making sure that they harass the road mayor so that he cannot enjoy any personal liberty or enjoy any security of the person. Third, the corrupt motives and that animates the impeachment of the Lord Mayor are very well known to informed people. For example, the corruption involved in the land transactions in Kampala City, some of which we have already mentioned, have been investigated by the IGG, which the Lord Mayor has been trying to prevent. These cannot be ignored. Blatant violation of the procurement laws involving conflicts of interests, abuse of power of Kampala City officials, and award of contracts to unqualified bidders, often related to NRM officials, cannot be allowed to continue as business as usual. Abuse of office is therefore inside the office of the executive director of Kampala City Authority, not the mayor's office. aware that the insertion of Section 49 in the KCCA, Kampala City Capital City Act, was not an accident. The president wants to siphon any resources and foreign aid intended for the development of Kampala into his bottomless, corrupt pot. Kampala shall not and will not be used by the President Museveni as a piggy bank. The bags of money the President is not ashamed to move around with. With a national disgrace. So, the large amounts of cash, which mysteriously stored in State House and Okero House. This is ridiculous. I mean, I've never heard of a head of state withdrawing bundles and bags of money from a bank and putting them in either the State House or Okero House. These are tips of the iceberg for Museveni corruption. So, in conclusion, enforcement of corruption laws in Uganda has many other obstacles to navigate besides NRM regime culture. Prosecutors are often targets of the people they investigate. This is understandable because corruption in Uganda has mutated into organized crime, as we have demonstrated. These conditions make corruption a prosecutor's job one of the most hazardous professional jobs in Uganda. For example, Human Rights Watch report published in October revealed that a prosecutor's dogs were killed, and then someone called the prosecutor about it. The caller threateningly inquired from the prosecutor how his dogs, which had already been killed, were doing. The prosecutor's office is, however, an important link in the administration of criminal justice and to fight corruption. When the prosecutor's role is compromised by corruption, the objective of controlling corruption through the democratic mechanism of checks and balances becomes practically impossible. It is important to realize that an element of social class also is involved in the process of combating corruption in Uganda. For example, when you look at other cases like Mukula's case, in which the president's blatant interference changed or influenced the result of the judicial process. In this case, it is the Lord Mayor who was investigated by corrupt judges. This means that, as the statistics on the prosecution of corruption clearly show, that most powerful members of society are not prosecuted. Only a few occasions when they are prosecuted, they are not even convicted. If convicted, they are not seriously punished. the Global Fund scandal, for example, the four who are accused, who were convicted, and seriously punished, were low-ranking officials. Mukula who was convicted by the chief magistrate, had his conviction reversed by the High Court. Jim Muhwez and Alex Kamugisha were discharged by the court on a no case to answer decision by the court. The DPP and the CID, who were specifically requested to further investigate cases where there was evidence of corruption, had been discovered by the Judicial Commission of Inquiry, headed by Justice James Ogola, did not respond to the commission's request. So you can see that there is a selective treatment of what is going on, and this is what is making the situation in Kampala very, very serious and very difficult also to deal with. It is not surprising, for example, that many commissions of inquiry which have probed the junk helicopters in which the president's brother admitted receiving a bribe of $800,000, was exonerated by his brother, the president. The investigations of corruption in the police department, of ghost employees, led to no prosecution. The Department of Wildlife in the Ministry of Tourism and many others did not lead to prosecution. The Chogm Commonwealth scandal, the Vice President Gilbert Bukenya was charged, but the case was dismissed on the technicality. The cases against the three ministers involving the Commonwealth Conference, Kusamu Kutesa, John Nasasira, Mwasigonde Rukutana, were dismissed on the technical ground that the prosecuting institution, IGG, was not properly constituted and therefore had no authority to prosecute the accused. No person has ever been prosecuted for creating ghost employees, which exist almost everywhere, in the army, in the police, in the schools. The Prime Minister's scandal, where officials of the Bank of Uganda were implicated, only one low-ranking accountant in the Prime Minister's office has been convicted and sent to jail. The Permanent Secretary, Pius Bigirimana, who is the accounting officer of the ministry, was implicated in many of these transactions, was quietly transferred to the Ministry of Gender. So you can see I'm mentioning these examples which may not appear to be relevant to Kampala City, is that they are, because we are talking about the failure both to prosecute effectively the crime, because you can't do that without a responsible, accountable, democratic government. So the Kampala City situation, the scandal in Kampala City, is just another illustration of the problems of corruption Uganda is facing. And the case of Kampala is unique in a way that you have organized crime in which the law enforcing officers, the police, are directly involved, and the city councillors are responsible for example, for procurement procedures and granting leases and contracts. These are very, very profitable activities which the members of the council, the councillors of Kampala City, who have ganged up against the mayor, are acting illegally, overlooking their conflicts of interest, in which the law clearly, the Local Administrations Act clearly prohibits, but they go ahead. And it's also, let me mention these councillors. I hope sooner than later they will face the tune, the music of the prosecution for corruption at one point, because it is strange that the same councillors were allied to Lukwago at one point, and they were demanding explanations from the executive, the director of executive authority, Jennifer Musisi. All of a sudden, they are now aligned with the director of the city authority, Jennifer Musisi, and this happened after they went to the State House. They were asked, the usual corrupt method of making, the leaders, the president is very, very open about this. He invites, for example, the NRM caucus in Parliament to go to his to State House to be briefed and sometimes to be bribed. And he invited these councillors. It was after these Kampala City councillors visited the President's State House that they started, they got aligned with the city authority. Instead of the mayor, they all ganged up against the mayor. But I've gone through in detail, pointing out all these charges and the problem with those charges, each of the charges. They are clearly charges which are designed to remove the mayor, not that there was really something substantively illegal, because the mere fact, and that's very important, the mere fact that the mayor was not accused of any single act of corruption is very, very significant. And it is very significant because corruption is so rampant, but they found no evidence whatsoever that the mayor was corrupt. Instead, they bring these charges of abuse of office, of incompetence, and of failing to carry out responsibilities, which are in fact substantive responsibilities of the director of the the city authority. So, with that, I will conclude today's discussion, conversation about Kampala City, a den of thieves. Hopefully, sooner than later, it will be not a den of thieves, but a habitat of decent people. Next week, let me also announce in my program, Democratization of Africa, the case of Uganda in comparative perspective. I will deal with the issue of homosexuality, and we will deal with all its aspects, the causation, the social norms, the scientific perspective, the regulation, the violation of rule of law, the young man who was killed when the police were looking, another example of corruption. And so until next week, I bid you farewell. Thank you.
kati abasajja batuwalula wadde batuwalula ku kifuba naye bwe tuliwalira tuli bakasuka batuwalula buwaluzi kati abasajja batuwalula